The road has a way of changing people when it stretches far enough. At first, Michael drove with purpose, his hands steady on the wheel, his eyes fixed ahead. The yellow Volkswagen moved quietly through the open land, unnoticed, almost invisible. No one pointed, no one stared. For the first time in a long while, Michael Jackson was just another traveler passing through. The highways carried him forward with patience, mile after mile unfolding beneath the tires. Cities faded into smaller towns, and then into places without names at all. Gas stations stood alone under wide skies. Cafes appeared briefly and disappeared just as quickly. Each stop reminded him how rarely he had lived like this, how rarely he had been allowed to simply move through the world without being watched. As the days passed, the landscape began to shift. Mountains rose slowly on the horizon, their silhouettes dark against the evening light. Rivers cut across the land, reflecting the sky like moving mirrors. At times, Michael rolled down the window just to feel the air on his face, warm and real, carrying the scent of earth and distance. He drove in silence most of the time. Music felt unnecessary. His thoughts filled the space easily. He thought about how strange it was that a dream had pushed him farther than any plan ever had. For years, his life had followed maps drawn by others, every step measured, every turn approved, but this road answered only to him. At night, when the road disappeared into darkness, he would pull over and rest. Sometimes in small roadside motels, sometimes beneath the open sky, the car parked quietly beside him. Sleep came lightly, and when it did, the dream returned, softer now, less urgent, as if it knew he was already on his way. Each morning, he unfolded the drawing again. The paper had begun to crease at the edges, worn from being held too often. Yet the image remained clear. Her face never changed, and neither did the pull it had on him. With every mile, something heavy began to fall away. The need to be perfect, the fear of being misunderstood, the constant pressure to perform. Out here, none of that mattered. The road didn't care who he was. It only asked that he keep moving. Somewhere between long stretches of empty highway and winding roads through hills and valleys, Michael realized he was no longer searching blindly. He wasn't chasing a fantasy. He was following a truth that had waited patiently for him to listen. The closer he felt to his destination, the quieter his thoughts became. There was no anxiety, no doubt, just a steady calm settling into his chest, as if his heart already knew what his mind was still catching up to. When the air began to feel different, warmer, heavier with life, he sensed it. The road was changing again. Trees grew thicker, colors deepened, the land felt older, richer, as though it carried stories beneath every step. Michael slowed the car, his grip tightening slightly on the wheel. He didn't need signs to tell him he was close now, very close. And for the first time since the dream began, he felt something stronger than longing. He felt arrival. The road ended quietly, without announcement. No signs, no markers, just a gradual slowing as the land opened into something older and more intimate. Michael eased the car forward, dust rising gently behind him as the yellow Volkswagen rolled into the village. The air felt alive here, thick with warmth, sound, and movement. People moved naturally through the space, talking, laughing, living without hurry. Children ran past him barefoot and curious, their laughter cutting through the stillness he had carried for so long. He stepped out of the car slowly, feeling the ground beneath his feet, steady and real. For a moment, he simply stood there, breathing it in, letting the journey settle into his bones. Then he reached into his jacket and unfolded the drawing. The paper was worn now, softened by time and touch. Holding it carefully, he approached the first group he saw and lifted the image gently, not demanding, not rushing, just asking with his eyes. Some looked and shook their heads. Others studied it longer, their expressions thoughtful, then pointed him onward. He walked from place to place, village to village, showing the drawing again and again. With each step, his heart beat louder, not with fear, but with an unfamiliar calm. He trusted this moment. He trusted the path that had brought him here. As the sun began to lower, casting long shadows across the earth, the village grew quieter. Fires were lit. Smoke curled softly into the sky. And then, in the distance, he saw her. She wasn't standing alone, and she wasn't waiting dramatically. She was simply there, moving through the evening like she belonged to it. Michael stopped walking. His breath caught without effort. The drawing trembled slightly in his hand. The woman turned as if sensing his presence, and their eyes met. In that instant, the world narrowed to a single point. The face from the dream stood before him, unchanged, unmistakable. No imagination could have created this precision. He took a few slow steps forward, his voice steady when he finally spoke. He didn't begin with explanations. He began with honesty. He told her about the dream, about the night when he had seen her for the first time without knowing her name. He told her about the loneliness that had filled his life despite everything he owned, about the road, the long miles, the quiet certainty that had guided him here. She listened without interruption, her gaze soft but unwavering. When he finished, silence settled between them, not heavy, but respectful. They sat together near the fire as night fully arrived, the flames dancing gently between them. The stars above felt closer here, brighter, as if leaning in to witness the moment. She spoke then quietly, simply, telling him about her life, her roots, the land that had shaped her. There was no rush, no need to impress, just two people sharing truth in its most natural form. As the fire crackled and the night deepened, something unspoken passed between them. Recognition, acceptance, love, forming not in a rush, but in certainty. By the time the fire burned low, there was no question left unanswered. The dream had led him exactly where it was meant to. And this time, when Michael looked at her, he wasn't dreaming anymore. Leaving the village didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a continuation, as if the road that had brought Michael here was simply bending back on itself. This time, he didn't leave alone. The journey back was quieter, gentler. There was no urgency now, no restless searching. The yellow Volkswagen moved steadily across the land, carrying two lives that had already learned how to move in the same direction. They spoke in fragments at first, small pieces of conversation that didn't need to be complete. Smiles filled the spaces words didn't reach. The road passed beneath them just as before, mountains and rivers returning like familiar friends. But Michael noticed something different in himself. The weight he had carried for years was gone, not replaced by excitement, not overwhelmed by noise, just lifted. When they arrived in America, the scale of everything changed again. The wide streets, the tall buildings, the quiet distance of luxury returned, but it didn't feel cold anymore. The house that once echoed with emptiness now held movement, warmth, and shared silence. Mornings felt slower, evenings felt fuller. The woman who had once lived only in a dream now moved through the rooms with ease, as if she had always belonged there. Time passed naturally, without ceremony, until one evening, as they sat together watching the light fade outside the windows, Michael reached for her hand. There was no speech prepared, no performance, just a simple truth spoken softly. He asked her to stay, not as a visitor, not as a memory, but as his life. She said yes without hesitation. The wedding was elegant but never loud, beautiful but never excessive. Those who attended spoke of how calm it felt, how real, as if nothing was being proven, only celebrated. In one corner of the room, there was a simple display, a small framed drawing, slightly worn at the edges, the first image Michael had ever seen of her, the face from the dream. Guests paused before it, curious, unaware of its weight. But for Michael, that drawing held everything. It was the moment before the journey began, the proof that some things arrive before we are ready to understand them. As he stood beside her, surrounded by quiet joy, Michael thought back to that night alone in the mansion, staring at the ceiling, asking a question he never thought would be answered. How could someone be known by the world and still feel unseen? The answer stood beside him now, real and steady. Love hadn't arrived through applause or perfection. It had come through silence, through a dream, through a road long enough to strip everything else away. And as the night settled gently around them, Michael understood something that would stay with him forever. Some dreams disappear when you wake up, but some dreams wake you up. And if you're brave enough to follow them, they don't just change your life, they give it meaning.